We continue now at the top of Daf Kufay and Vav Amar Aleph and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 176a. The Gemara says, Amar Rapapa says, Hilchis, so the halacha is, milva al peh, that when it comes to a milva al peh, an oral loan, gova min ha-yarshin, one does collect that from the yarshim, from the heirs, v'eino gova min ha-lakuchos. However, one does not collect that from the lakuchos, from the buyers. And the Gemara explains, Gova min ha-yarshin, the reason why it's collected from the yarshin, kadei shelo tinol delos bifnei lavin, because we don't want to close the door before borrowers. Nobody is going to lend money if they cannot collect from the person's yarshim. However, ve'eno gova min ha-lakuchos, however, he does not collect from the buyers, the less leikola, because the word about that loan does not go out. People are not aware of it. Buyers cannot beware, and therefore you cannot collect from the buyers. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Hotzi olav ksav yado shu chayev lo. If the malva produces the lova's handwriting that the lova is obligated, he produces essentially an IOU. Gova min chasim b'nei chorin, so then he can collect from free property, but not from the chasim mishubadim. And the Gemara says, Boy minei Rabba bar Noson me Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Noson asked Rabbi Yochanan the following question: Huchza ksav yado bebezdin mai. What if the ksav yad, the handwriting of the lova, it was actually certified in the court? The court certifies that document, certifies the obligation. So in such a situation, is the malva then able to collect from the chasim mishubadim? Amar lei, so Rabbi Yochanan said back to him, he said back to Rabba bar Noson, Afal pisha huchza ksav yado bebezdin, even though his handwriting was certified in the court, Eino gova ella min chasim b'nei chorin. He can only collect from free property. He cannot collect from the chasim mishubadim. And the Gemara continues, Meisiv Rami bar Chama. Rami bar Chama asks a question on this. This is from a Mishnah in Meseches Gittin. Shlosha Gittin Psulin, v'im nisas havlad kosher. There are 3 Gittin that are puzzle. However, if she actually uses the get to remarry, on a doraisa level, we are going to say that the child is considered to be kosher. The get is going to be kosher on a doraisa level. V'yeluhain, and the 3 Gittin are as follows. Kasav b'chsav yado v'ein olav edim. Let's say the get is written in the husband's handwriting, but there are no witnesses. Or yesh olav edim, let's say there are witnesses, ve'ein bozman, but there's no date. Yesh bozman ve'ein bo ela echod, let's say there is a date, but there's only one witness signed. Hare elo shlosha Gittin psulim, these are 3 cases of Gittin that are puzzle. V'im nisis havlad kosher, but if she uses it to remarry, the child will be considered kosher. Rabbi Lazar Omer, Rabbi Lazar says, even if there are no witnesses signed on the get, but it was given in front of witnesses, there are Eidei Mesira there are witnesses who see the get given over to the wife, kosher, it is going to be kosher, and one can collect from the chasim mishubadim in that situation. And the Rashbam explains, within the sheet of Rabbi Lazar, kosher, it's kosher, again, if it's given before witnesses, even though there are no witnesses signed on it, lechatchila, it's kosher lechatchila, according to Rabbi Lazar, tesvir le Eidei Mesira karti, because Rabbi Lazar holds, as we've mentioned, Eidei Mesira karti, it's the Eidim who see the giving of the get, the giving of the shtar, that make it a good shtar. And then Rabbi Lazar said, "V'govim in chasim mishubadim." You can use such a document to collect even from the chasim mishubadim. Kolomar, what it means to say is, "V'im shtar milvahu." Let's say this is not even a get. Let's say it's a shtar milv, it's a loan. Also, ashtar hakosu b'chsav yado, talking about that document which is written in the person's handwriting. V'ein bo edim, and there are no witnesses. Ela shemasur b'fnei edim, but it was given over in front of witnesses. Govim in chasim mishubadim. In such a situation, one can collect from the chasim mishubadim. V'achim mafarish hasam Rabbi Yochanan. I'll leave it to Rabbi Lazar b'perak hamevi. This is how Rabbi Yochanan explains Rabbi Lazar's Shita. Sha'afila b'shar shtaros. We're talking even by other kinds of documents, not just the gerisha. Govim in chasim mishubadim. One can collect from the chasim mishubadim be'edei mesira bilvad, with edei mesira alone. And what's the point? The point is, Alma, we see from here, Hotzi olav ksav yado shu chayev lo. If you have a case where a person produces the lova's handwriting that the lova is obligated him, umasr b'fnei edim, and then that's given over in front of witnesses, gova mimishavdi, the giving over in front of witnesses is enough to allow him to collect from the chasim mishubadim. V'chol shekein huchzak bebezdin. So certainly in the case that we were discussing, where it's certified in bezdin, meaning his handwriting is then certified in bezdin, certainly over there one should be able to collect from the chasim mishubadim. And the Gemara continues and answers, Shani Hasam, it's different over there, because over there already the time that the document is written within Rabbi Lazar's case, already from that point in time, the person is obligating himself. And the Rashbam explains, Hachig Arsinon Shani Hasam, it's different over there. At the time of the writing, he's Meshabed himself, meaning Kishenichtav Hashtar. What that means to say is, when the document was written, Nichtav Kidei Lemosr B'fnei Edim, it's being written with the understanding understanding that it's going to be given in front of witnesses. That basically the Eidei Mesira are functioning in place of Eidei Chasima. It really is like it's signed by witnesses. Hilkach, therefore, since Rabbi Lazar holds Eidei Mesira Karti, it's as if they signed the shtar. There, of course, you can collect from the Chasim Meshubadim. Here you're talking about a case where a person is just in his handwriting. The lova essentially admits by writing this document. The reason why he's writing it down is he doesn't want to later be able to retract, to deny it. To say I paid it. As long as the malva is holding this document with his signature. The point is, in our case that we're asking about, we're talking where it wasn't written in the language of a normal document, which generally witnesses sign. And then afterwards they certified it in court. So in our case, at the time of the loan, it is certainly like an oral loan. In our situation, Bezin can't come later on with their certification to suddenly turn it into a shtar where there is achrayis nechasim. Because it wasn't written with that understanding at the outset. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Arev hayotze la'achar chisum shtaros v'chulu." If the arev is signed after the signature of the witnesses, so then one can only collect from the arev from the chasim b'nei chorin, from free property, not from the chasim mishubadim. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav says, Kodem chisum shtaros. If the arev is signed before the signature of the witnesses, so then govim in a chasim mishubadim. So then you can collect from the arev, even from the chasim mishubadim, because the witnesses are signing on the obligation of the arev. But le'achar chisum shtaros. But if he is signed after the signature of the witnesses, then govim in a chasim b'nei chorin. Then you can only collect from the chasim b'nei chorin of the arev. And the Gemara continues, Zimnin Amar Rav. Sometimes Rav said a little differently. Sometimes Rav said as follows: Afilu kodem chisum shtaros. Even if the arev is signed before the signature of the witnesses, eino gova elam min chasim b'nei chorin. Still, you can only collect from free property, even though the witnesses are signed after the arev. And the Gemara continues, Kasha de Rav. That seems to be a contradiction within Rav. In one place, Rav says that if the arev is signed kodem chisum shtaros, you collect from the chasim mishubadim. In the other time, Rav said that you collect from the chasim b'nei chorin. And the Gemara continues and answers, Lo kasha, it's not difficult. Had chasa be ploni arev. In one case, we're talking where the way it's written is so and so is an arev, and had chasa be u ploni arev. And in the other case, it's written and so is an arev, is a guarantor. The difference is if it says and, that's connecting it to the rest of the document. Then we assume the witnesses are signed on the arvus as well, and therefore the witnesses are signed on the guarantee of the guarantor. So you can collect even from the chasim mishubadim when there is a vav. But if it just says ploni arev, it looks like a separate statement. Maybe the witnesses are signing on the rest of the document, but maybe they're not signing on that separate statement. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and now Rabbi Yochanan says, Echad zeh v'echad zeh, in both situations, eino gova ella min chasim b'nei chorin. You can only collect from the chasim b'nei chorin. It seems that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that even in a situation where the arev is signed before chisum shtaros, and it doesn't matter if there's a vav or not, even in that situation, it's only going to be in a chasim b'nei chorin, and that's what the Gemara says. It seems that Rabbi Yochanan is saying, V'afagav, the chasabei uploni arev. Even if it says uploni arev with a vav, even in that situation, we don't necessarily assume the witnesses are signed on the arvus, and therefore you can only collect from the chasim b'nei chorin of the arev. That's how the Gemara is currently understanding Rabbi Yochanan. And the Gemara continues, Meisiv Rava. Rava asks a question from the following brisa on this understanding of Rabbi Yochanan. It says in the brisa, Eidim hachasumen al she'elas shalom beget. Let's say witnesses are signed, and there's a greeting that's written into the get. So so that's disqualified. That's not considered good signatures. Chashin shem al she'elas shalom chasmu, because we're concerned maybe they're really just signing on the greeting. They're not signing on the get. V'yomer Rabbi Avo, and Rabbi Avo said, L'didi mefarsha lei mineid Rabbi Yochanan. To me, it was explained in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, she'ilu pasal, that if it says send a greeting without a vav, then it's disqualified, because then maybe they're just signing on that greeting. But if it's with a vav, it's connecting it, so then kosher, so then it's kosher, because they're certainly signing on the entire thing. And so you see that Rabbi Yochanan says that when there is a vav, that does act as a connection, and we say, therefore, they're signing on the entire thing. So how can we say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, echad zeh v'echad zeh, it doesn't matter if it's ploni arev and uploni arev, that it's going to be in the chasim b'nei chorin? It's not true. If it's uploni arev, it should be from the chasim mishubadim. And the Gemara continues and answers Hachanami here also to Chasav Ploni Arev. What it means to say is, in the case of Ploni Arev, then we're going to say that it's only from the Chasim B'nei Chorin, and according to this understanding, when Rabbi Yochanan says Echad Zeh v'Echad Zeh, you collect from the Chasim B'nei Chorin, it simply means Echad Zeh v'Echad Zeh, whether he signed above the signature of the witnesses, or whether it's below the signature of the witnesses, you're only going to collect from the Chasim B'nei Chorin in a situation of Ploni Arev. But even Rabbi Yochanan would admit that if it said U Ploni Arev above the signature of the witnesses, there you would collect from the Chasim Meshubadim. The Gemara says, Yihachi, but if so, Hainu Rav, isn't that exactly what Rav said? Rav already made exactly that distinction, and the Gemara says, Ema, you're right, rather you should say, V'chein Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says the same thing as Rav. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Maisu bo lefnei Rabbi Yishmael v'chula. There was an incident like this in front of Rabbi Yishmael. And the Mishnah went on to say that Benana says that in the case of Arev hayotze la'achar chisum shtaros, you actually don't collect from the Arev at all. And Benanis compared it to a situation where a person agrees to be an Arev because he sees the lov is being strangled. And the idea is there at the time of the loan, the Arev didn't produce the guarantee. And since there was no guarantee at the time of the loan wasn't made with the understanding that the Arev was guaranteeing anything. And therefore, in those situations, Benana says there's no obligation whatsoever upon the Arif. And the Gemara says, Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Afal pi shekilos Rabbi Yishmael as Benanis, even though we see in our Mishnah that Rabbi Yishmael praises Benanis, halacha kemoso. Still, the halacha actually is like Rabbi Yishmael, meaning the halacha is by Arif hayotze lachar chisum shtaros. You can collect from the Arif. You can't collect from the chasim meshubadim, but you can collect from the free property of the Arif. And the Gemara continues, the following question, B'chonuk mali Amar Rabbi Yishmael. What about the case that Benanis brought, that case of chonuk where a person is being strangled and so the Arif says, I'll be a guarantor, stop strangling him? What would Rabbi Yishmael say in that situation? Would he agree to Benanis in that situation that the Arif is not obligated? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here the following proof. The Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yaakov says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Cholak hoy Rabbi Yishmael, af b'chonuk. Rabbi Yishmael would disagree. Even in the case of chonuk, he would say the Arif is in fact obligated. And the Gemara says, halacha kemoso, o ein halacha kemoso, is the halacha like Rabbi Yishmael in that regard, in that case of chonuk or not? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here the following proof. The Chiyasa Rav and Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because when Ravin came, he said that Rabbi Yochanan said, Cholak hoy Rabbi Yishmael, af b'chonuk. Rabbi Yishmael disagrees even by the case of chonuk, of the strangulation, by halacha kemoso, af b'chonuk. And the halacha is like him even by chonuk. Even in that situation, there is an obligation upon the Arif. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, Chanuk v'kanu miyado mishtabed, that if it's a case of strangulation, this case we just had above, and they make a kinyan suder, the Arif actually makes a kinyan to obligate himself, that's when there's an obligation. And the Gemara continues and says, Mechlal, that implies, the Arif bi'alma, that in a normal case of an Arif, you don't have the situation of Chanuk, lo by kinyan, then a kinyan would actually not be needed in order to have the Arif be obligated. And the Gemara says to that, Upliga de Rav Nachman, that actually argues on Rav Nachman. The Amar Rav Nachman, because Rav Nachman says, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video, on Daf Kuf Ayin Vav Amid Beis.